So for people who don't know who you are, can you kind of just explain who Jason Schnitzer is?
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Jason Schnitzer. I coach men in basically self-control and emotional regulation. And a lot of guys find themselves being successful in a lot of the areas that, they're told to be, and whether it be work, at their job, friends, hobbies, in the gym, etc. But like it doesn't translate to having little kids and having a long-term relationship. And a lot of times, I find guys where, things are pretty good and they can't, like, for example, stop, losing it over their kids, not listening, or going 0 to 100 when it's bedtime, or, getting defensive when, their wife's talking about forgetting about taking out the trash or giving them feedback. And it's the thing that kind of is like wedging in between, him and having, the life with the people that, um, he's basically chasing, and there's something stopping him. And it's just like, I don't, and it's like, a lot of times I hear it's just like, yeah, I don't know what it is. It just like comes out of nowhere. And yeah, that's what I help guys do, is kind of like pull away the veil, if you will. And, really what I've found is just like missing skills and understanding and, education around like what's actually going on for you. And, yeah, when you put, a missing piece in a puzzle, it finally looks right. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So,
That's awesome. I mean, because coming from a guy, I feel like used to do that, where you just put up the defenses right away with things, or you're like, well, no, I don't agree with my kids, so I'm going to snap at them. I was that way.
yeah,
And it took a long time to get out of that. It's awesome that you're doing that for men, because it takes time, like, to get out of that, that mindset and kind of change things for your family. So it's cool that you're
yeah,
out there doing that.
yeah, man.
Um,
Yeah.
have you found, how long does it usually take, do you see, for someone, like when you start coaching them and you kind of get into it and you kind of put that puzzle pieces back into place, like how long does it usually take for them to kind of like, all right, I see what it is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually get that question a lot, especially with guys that have never done this before. And the non-direct answer is it depends. Like how much work you put into it, and like it's kind of like when you're learning a new skill, right? It's like it takes time, it takes practice. Because in a lot of ways, like what you're doing is you're in like undoing things that have kind of
Mhm.
automatically been going on for sometimes, and most of the time, decades upon decades. That being said, it's like once you learn to do it a better way and you start getting better results, happens faster than you think, right? Because ultimately, it's like it's all about practice, it's all about reps. And for most of us, especially guys, like, we don't really get practice regulating our emotions, right? Most of us like suppress, repress, bypass, like just avoid, right? A lot of us like will claim to be calm, but really what that is like we're bottling it up. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden we're not calm. Like we don't really have like the tools or the controls over what's actually going on. And so, once you like understand what's going on and then have experiences of it, it's kind of like, I don't know, sometimes I'll relate it to like you see a car that you've never seen before, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, how long has that car been around? That's kind of cool, right? Then all of a sudden you just start seeing them everywhere,
Mhm.
right? It's kind of like that thing where it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so the next time around, which, when you've got one, two, sometimes seven kids, right, and a wife and a job and stress, and there's lots of things that are like pushing your buttons, but you're always going to have an ample opportunity to practice new skills. So that being said, it's not like a one and done thing,
Mhm.
but couple of months, couple of 3 months, if you will, where you're really going to start seeing like real change. And like ultimately, as much as we start to feel different, the probably like at least the feedback that I get, the best thing is when it's like, your wife's the one that's like, whoa, like I can see a difference, basically. Yeah.
And that is a really good feeling. Like, for this podcast, like I'm really good at connecting with people and like kind of getting people on and reaching out to people, talking to people, and like talking to some really influential people now. My wife came the other day. She's like, it's crazy how good you are at this. She's like, I'm really proud of just how you've taken off with this. I'm like, oh, thank you.
Mm,
And from your best friend, essentially, like that's a really big, it feels so good to feel that. And for me, like I was in a dark place for a while to where my kids didn't want me as their dad. My wife was like, hey, you got to figure this out. You got to get help. And now
mm,
coming back to where, I know my kids love me. My daughter's like, dude, dad, I love you. And my wife's now telling me she's proud of me. Like it's such a good feeling to how to go through those emotions. And for anyone
yeah.
listening, like if you're on that kind of like edge where you're like, I don't know if I want to do this or not, like take that step. It's the
Yeah.
best thing you can do for your family. And that's our whole job as a dad, as the man of the house, is to make the best situation for the home.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. And yeah, like I get that, completely get that where it's like, no, oh, I'm going to change tomorrow and I'm going to be a whole new man. Like, no, it's going to take a little bit of time because
Yeah.
it's like when you're learning to ride a bike, you get used to the training wheels. You're like, oh, I got this. And then let's come off. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, don't know what to do.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I
Yeah.
love
Yeah. And like to your point, um, it's sometimes it's the hardest thing, especially for guys to do, to like first acknowledge that they need help. Second, actually ask for it.
it.
Cause, the same thing with like, hey, dudes don't have a lot of practice, like learning how to regulate their emotions. It's like, well, like the same thing goes. And the reason why that is because, socially, culturally, within the family, friends group, you know, guys basically aren't allowed to have emotions unless you're like angry,
Hmm.
basically. So then, like, a lot of times I've found like everything comes out as or expressed as anger, sadness, anger, grief, anger, fear, anger, embarrassment, anger. And it's like, wow, you're angry. And it's like, no, I'm not sure that that's the case. Right. And we have these not so great experience, like showing emotion, which doesn't give us any practice. And then we have not so great experience asking for help and like what
Hmm.
that makes it mean we are. Are we broken? Are we not good enough? Right. Are we a big baby because like we can't do it on our own? Right. And there's this relationship to like reaching out. Um, is not an okay thing to do, which is ultimately what keeps you stuck. And like the fortunate or unfortunate thing is like most guys don't actually choose into this work. It's not everybody, like proactively, right? In other words, it's like there's a big problem and it's painful, right? And the pain of staying the same ends up being more scary than the pain of change, which is what like has them choosing into this stuff. Um, and like I said, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of times they're just saying it's like, hey, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A lot of guys don't reach until it's like the pound of cure. And to your point about not waiting, it's like, I'm just here to say, like, as dark as the hole might be, like, it makes sense that, like, for a lot of guys, it'll be like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, yeah, that's because, like, you're digging still. It's like you're not turned around and looking up the right way where there's people up there like able to like throw a rope down to you and give you the tools to like help you climb out.
I like that. That's kind of a cool way to look at it. Um, and I think it's just, for the most of people, most men that listen to this, it's just been the way we were raised and the way our parents were raised. And it just
Right.
passed down, passed down, passed down.
Right.
It sucks is like there's so many people out there that don't even know like these kind of resources are a thing and they're
Right.
just living, they just can keep digging.
Right.
I just wish there was a way where it's like, all right, this is going to go out to everybody that needs to see it and let's fix everybody.
Yeah.
But that's just what it is. That's just what keeps us down is unfortunately that people think they're in that situation. They think they're alone. They think they're in this dark pit forever and there's no way out. But
Right.
no, I really do like that when all I need to do is turn around and see the light. It's right behind them the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, for just, well, how long have you been doing the coaching? And then like, have you had people come back to me like just just thank you for changing my life and just that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So like kind of back to your point of like, isn't it nice for the people around you to actually recognize the things that you're doing are like really like making a difference? It's like, cause ultimately that's kind of like at the root of like why all guys, dads, husbands, fathers, do what they do. It's like they want that appreciation, respect, etc.
Hmm.
Which is kind of the hardest thing because like a lot of times they're getting that everywhere, right? Except for in their house.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of like the missing link that when you finally are able to, um, be able to be more present, be able to like listen and not fix or defend, right? To be able to be calm in the chaos and not lose it. And like for that to be the consistent way that you show up, like that is absolutely life changing, right? A lot
Hmm.
of guys like have spent their whole lives trying to like get to a certain place. Most of the time it's like we're building to, you know, bring in a number financially. Then we get there and then the same like actions and way of being that it took to get there doesn't translate over into your home. And so when there's a problem, a lot of times guys like will basically double down at work, right? Or just like instead of being able to like listen, reflect, or be defensive about like, yeah, but look at all this stuff over here that I do so great. Right. And there's just like it's kind of like two cups to fill and this one's empty, this one's full. And like, the people that you care about are kind of asking you to put some things in this cup. And that basically, activates something in you to where it's hard to look at, to where they're like, hey, look at this over here. Stop looking at this right here.
Hmm.
Right. So yeah, when you learn to fill up both cups, it's like, I don't know the word I'd use, but like revolutionary and life changing. Like you said, like you've kind of experienced like that going from, not feeling like you're the leader or the person in your home where people look up to you to like getting that validated by, the way that they treat you and the way that they talk to you. That's like something, it's a cliche, but it's something that, money can't buy, even though it can. Okay. But yeah, as far as being a coach, like I like to say that I've been a coach my whole life, right? I like my journey started without knowing it basically back in high school. It's like funny. It's like my first day in high school, right? I'm like, I played baseball. Like I was relatively tall and bigger for my age, but there's still, I think everybody going as a freshman, there's like a little bit of like, oh my gosh, this is high school, right? It gets kind of like, at least from where I'm sitting now, worked up to be this bigger thing than it really is.
Hmm.
But I digress. It's like my first day of high school was great, right? And I finally got out to, at that time, baseball was my world. And I was like, dude, isn't this awesome? My sixth period is baseball. Like, what, like, how much cooler can it get? Right. I get out there and it's like all my fears about high school, like, were all like compacted into like that. Um, it's not a subject matter going to baseball because the seniors were absolute dicks.
Hmm.
Right. And I'm like, wow, this is like my worst nightmare, basically. And I just remember I'm like, this is ridiculous. Right. Like, and I was a little bit cocky. Part of me was very cocky then, where I'm like, dude, like, you don't even know me and what I'm capable of and all this stuff. And I'm like, who's to say that I'm not going to be on varsity at the end of the year, like helping you guys, which by the way, I was. All that being said, I'm like, you know what? When I am a sophomore, junior, senior, like there's no way that I'm going to look back and do this to like another human. Right. And it was like at that time, and I did, like I said, I didn't realize it, but I really started shifting to like, look, like most people, like most guys, like want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of something bigger, right? They want to learn, they want to grow. And there's this like gatekeeping, I feel that happens that, in my opinion, again, is deeply rooted in insecurity, inability to regulate your own emotions. So you're like withhold. There's like
Hmm.
a there's like a control there, right? because when you think about it, when you're out of control, like what comes up? Feelings, right? And most guys don't know how to navigate that. So that's a long-winded way of answering the question. But ultimately, that's like what I'm here to do is like not gatekeep this stuff. Like you said, get it out to everybody. And like you're doing a great job of it's like, how do you do it? It's like guys like you that are like, taking the risk, just putting it out there, being consistent over time, and having the support to keep going.
And that's all it is like, it's just the consistency. Like we talked about last week with Iron Sanctuary, Kevin Clevenger, and he was just talking about one rep at a time. And that's all it takes for everything. Like you can do
Mm-hmm.
anything in your life as long as you're taking it by little steps instead of looking at this giant, massive, crazy thing. Like you're going to climb
Right.
Everest. Like, oh man, how do I get to the top of that? Well, you just take the first step.
That's
And it
right.
was kind of funny on the last episode because when you were saying like we kill it at work, we kill it in all these other things, but then we don't know how to apply it at home. That's his whole thing is one rep at a time at the gym for his work, for everything. And he was kind
Yeah.
of having issues like connecting with his wife and all this stuff. And he's like talking about the stuff. I was like, just put them together. And then on the episode, he was having this whole revolution of like, I've never even thought to like do one rep at home, you know? And so
Yeah.
his, it all kind of floated, which was really cool. But that's all it is just, if you're listening and you're like, how the heck do I change my family? How do I better my household? You just start. Like,
Yeah.
you could sit there and think about it all day and worry about it and like, well, will it ever get better? It's just going to take that first step in trying to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, if I can add to that, it's like trying to make it better, but with help, like with support. Cause like in my experience, most guys try to make it better by like doing it by themselves. Right. I mean, it's like, and I'm not knocking reading books, listening to podcasts, reading quote cards. Like that's all good. But until like you get like one-on-one or group support in like learning, like when you're talking about like just start, do a rep, it's like, okay. And like, what does that look like? What does an actual rep look like? Right. Because sometimes these guys start and do a rep and like it backfires in their face because they try to take what they're doing at work and one rep at home, which can be like the most frustrating thing in the world. Because, like, again, like a lot of times what we take at work and apply it to home, it's like very solution oriented. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of just like being able to be, right? And it's like your kid's struggling, fix it. Your wife's having a problem, like let me solve it, right? A lot of times it's just like being there and supporting, right? And supporting can just like you being present with them, encouraging, listening, like not fixing, right? Which again can be frustrating because there's not a lot of action in there. And there's something that is wrong that is technically out of your control. And guess what that's going to do? It's gonna fucking activate you. Hopefully we can cuss on this podcast.
Yeah, we're
Sorry.
good.
Um, yeah, you're gonna be activated, right? And if you don't have the tools to understand what that is, it's like again, like sometimes guys will check out, sometimes they'll numb out on their phone, sometimes they'll video games. It's like food. It doesn't matter what it is, right? There's so many coping strategies out there. But ultimately, it's like all your family is like asking for is you to be there now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like when there's lots of stress, when you don't know how to downshift, when you can't regulate what's going on in your system, there's just this natural propensity to kind of like find ways to check out, whether you're conscious about it or not. And that's really the hardest part. And the best, easiest way to get to like being an embodied version of like how you'd like to be is to find mentors and coaches, therapists, etc., that can like model that for you and like hold your hand and walk you through it, that know where you are, can identify the things that are going on for you and like can see what's next for you so that you can like be set. Like that's what like a good coach or mentor does. It's like, okay, now here to where like finally it just becomes like, okay, now I'm just like putting up the reps, right? And there is like a cool correlation to like fitness. Think about like a going into the gym and like working out on your own, you're going to like maybe get some progress, right? But like when you've got a trainer there that can like set you up on a plan And like you said, how long does it take to change? Well, you're not going to go to the gym 3 times and expect, right? Like you might feel a little bit better, but like the change that you're going to start to see in yourself, and then after a while, then people start to see it, right? It's kind of how it goes.
So for anyone listening, if you could give some free advice, what would be that first step? Like you go find a mentor and stuff. What would be that
Yeah.
first step that they can start the change?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like for me, it's always like how I work with guys, there's a little bit of education
Mm,
because sometimes it's like I'm out of control, like I lose control, I'm reactive, like I'm saying and doing things that I'd rather not do, or like I don't mean, and then I regret it and then I feel guilty afterwards. And that sort of pattern like repeats,
mm-hmm,
right? And then our kids start anticipating that, and our wife maybe like, is getting more critical or is like, maybe not even trying as much, right? It's like always to me is like, let's get to the root of the what's going on here, right? And if there's something going on that we don't have control over, it's like we need to like learn how to give you the tools to be in control,
mm-hmm,
right? To stay calm in chaotic situations, conflict, right? Sometimes it can be like avoiding conflict, right? Sometimes like, culturally, socially, like happy wife, happy life is just kind of like preached, right? Which ultimately leads to, you know, resentment on both ends, is
mm-hmm.
what I've found, right? And sometimes like we appease and we say yes when we mean to say no, like, and we avoid conflict and we don't even like, we know we're doing it, but we don't, right? Until we start like resenting and blaming. But like ultimately, what we want to do is get back to like, hey, what can we control, right? How many times have we, taking responsibility, said yes, saying no? That being said, like something that's really important to know about, like, because there's a lot of like, hey, you got to take responsibility. You got to look in the mirror, which, like, yeah, I'm all for.
Mm-hmm.
And like a little caveat to that is like, it's kind of like lifting a heavy weight, right? If you don't have the capacity to lift a heavy weight, what's going to happen?
You gotta fail.
You're going to get, yeah,
You
you're
get
going to
hurt.
get, and you're going to hurt,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's actually going to make you less likely to want to do that again. And like, if everybody's telling you should be able to do this and you can't, like what happens is like that's a recipe for shame, right? So responsibility without capacity is shame, right? So that goes for like, things in business, but it also goes for stuff at home too, right? So what you need to do is grow your capacity, right? Your bandwidth, which a lot of times involves like the pattern usually again is suppress, repress, bottle up, right? Hold it in, compartmentalize until you just can't anymore. And where you can't anymore, unfortunately, ends up being around the people that you care about the most, right? Your kids, your family, friends, etc. And you got to learn the tools and the skills to be able to like downshift, right? To not be in such a stressed out, whether that be acute or chronic state over time. And when you've got more capacity and more bandwidth, that's going to give you the ability to like, I don't know, call it staying in the pocket longer, right? To where it's like consistently, you're not going to be doing those things like, blowing up on your kid, right? Or getting defensive with your wife. And usually that's like at the root of everything is I don't know how much, or if anybody's ever talked about the nervous system on your podcast yet, but that's like usually what I find is at the root of what's going on is our nervous system. A lot of times we'll be like, yeah, we got to shift our mindset. But the interesting thing is basically it's like now very mainstream physiology. There's a mind body connection, right? And there's like this pathway that basically communicates information from your brain to your body and your body to your brain. Not a trick question, but if you were to say what's bigger, divide your body from the neck to the top of your head or neck all the way down, what's physically bigger?
Neck all the way down.
Yeah, by like a long shot, right? So the pathway is actually skewed in favor of the communication of where it's bigger up to your brain to the tune of 80% to 20%, right? So we can be lost in our thoughts. We can be lost in these stories that we're telling us, right? And most of the time when that happens, Like what we're doing is we're trying to like make sense of like this thing that's going on down here. But the two become at odds, right? We might be afraid of something and we're talking ourselves out of being afraid, right? Who wins an 80-20 battle eventually?
It's the
Yeah,
80.
the 80%, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a inevitable thing. But then like going back to like if we lack capacity, right, with that responsibility of, and we're trying to do something difficult or something we haven't done before and we can't, right? There's shame. Well, it's like basically you're shaming yourself for losing an 80-20 battle. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because like where, like what your nervous system's firing off are like signals to let you know, like, oh my gosh, this might happen. Basically, your nervous system's this like great predictor of what might happen, kind of
Yeah.
like tying it back into like your like generation after generation, the same things like show up, right? Well, the coding for like that stuff gets engraved in your nervous system. And then you start having these like basically unconscious responses, which show up as like emotions or somatics, which just means like stuff coming up from your body. Like, your chest gets tight. Sometimes like guys will be like, yeah, I know when this is happening because this happens, but I don't know what that is. Right. Or, this pit in your stomach, like after the thing happens, it's like, ugh, I almost feel nauseous and sick. Right. And then we'll just like sometimes that lingers for the day or the couple of days or a week or whatever, right? And that's your nervous system basically kind of getting your attention in that moment, right? And so a lot of times what we're doing is like we're going through life with like only 20% of our tool belt, right? Without like access to kind of the majority of what's going on. It's almost like the problem is like an iceberg, and like we go and we attack that 20% that we can see above the water, but then we keep slamming into what's underneath it over and over and over again. And we're like, what the heck? And everybody around us is like, yeah, what the heck? And then we feel even worse about it, right? So when you are able to like see the whole picture, going back to the idea of like how quickly can you change, it's like, well, dude, when you have all the tools for the job, right? You're not like cutting down this tree with an axe, let alone a dull axe, and you can get a chainsaw out, let's just say, right? It's going to be a lot easier, right? And when you're talking about capacity and being able to have more for everybody, it's like, well, if you can do things more efficiently, right? If things like certain instances with your kids or wife just don't take you out, right? Well, you're going to have a lot more for everybody. And the cool part is like this translates to work too, right? It's like you take your nervous system everywhere. It's the thing that's being like heavily taxed and impact at work, right? But basically when you think about it, the whole bottling up, compartmentalizing, like basically holding it in, tamping it down, suppressing it, that's like your 80% firing off. And then like all day you're using 20% to just like keep that at bay.
Mm.
So like, of course, when you get home and then your kid is having a hard time, it's like you snap and then lose it, right? Even though you've been calm all day, right? But again, like practically, logically, biologically, what's happening is like you're just out of resources fighting a battle that you were never actually set up to win. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like how people talk about bottling up. It's that little tiny cork in that little hole, and once everything gets bubbled and bubbled and bubbled, it just takes that little bit of pressure to make it
Yeah.
explode. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really cool to think about that because, a lot of people, they just, like you said, they just don't know, oh, I have this feeling, I don't know what the heck it is. But to go and actually think about, it's just, you're pushing everything down, you're pushing everything down. And it's
Right.
finally what's the straw on the camel's back. It finally broke. Hey guys, I just want to take a quick second from the podcast. As dads, we know how important it is to keep our kids safe, especially when it comes to their phones. The Bark phone is designed with families in mind. It gives you the peace of mind in knowing your kids are protected online while still giving them the freedom to stay connected. And right now, you can get 15% off your Bark phone subscription when you use code UNSCRIPTED at checkout. That's 15% off just by using code UNSCRIPTED. So if you've been looking for the perfect phone for your kids or just want to control safety over their device, head to Bark and grab the Bark phone today.
Totally. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that usually doesn't happen until, you know, well, sometimes this isn't like a guarantee, if you will. Sometimes it happens before, but it usually doesn't happen until it's like, oh, you got one kid, and then you've got two kids, and now you've got three kids, and all of a sudden, like the thing, something works until it doesn't.
Hmm.
Basically, in kids especially, pressure test your system, right? And
Yeah.
your systems of like how you do things. They're like little they're like little grenades
Hmm.
that go off, right? And if your foundation isn't strong, well, like they're gonna show you where your cracks are, right? And guess what? A lot of times, those are the same cracks that like kind of like your parents had,
Mm.
right? And not to make anybody's parents bad, but like, hey, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. But basically, like, it's common to kind of struggle in the same area, the same dynamic. All of a sudden, that pattern is sort of repeating itself, maybe in a relationship or with your kids. It's like, and maybe even especially with the kid that reminds you most of you,
Yep.
right? It's like, yeah, I've got four, but it's just the one that really sets me off.
Hmm.
And I'm like, interesting in my head. I'm like, and then usually they'll say it, and it's like, yeah, it's the kid that reminds me most of me, right? Which, when you think about how your nervous system works, it works basically by, activating based off of lived experiences that you had that didn't go so well, right? It kind of stores that, codes that, right? So when you see that in your kid, son or daughter, right? And it's like, it's extra activating basically, because it's like, oh, you remember that, right? And it's not uncommon for that activation to intensify in certain age range,
Hmm.
just where you maybe experience a particularly difficult time, right? And this isn't woo woo. This is literally your biology. Like this is like we as, humans, what's the driving factor for us? Mostly survival, staying alive, right? It's not to like live this like thriving life, right? It's to stay alive, right? We have a general, like, and what does that practically mean? It's like we have a general negativity bias, right? Because we're more concerned about being safe and like worrying about what's dangerous versus like noticing all the good stuff, right? You could have 99 people in the day be like, hey, like, wow, you're so awesome. And then like one bad review, and what sticks out?
Yep. A bad review. Yep.
Yeah, that bad review. And you're like, that motherfucker. Right. But a lot of people are just like, why do I do that? Right. Basically. Right. And, knowledge is power. And just knowing it's like, that is in a lot of ways normal.
Hmm.
Like, that is how we're wired. Right. So, like, we're kind of fighting our biology in a lot of ways. Right. Um, you know, to extrapolate, like in your life, living a better life, you're not wired to live the best life. You're wired to keep yourself alive, basically. Right. Same thing with your kids. Like, everybody's like, I want to stay calm in the moment. Well, guess what? Like, there's studies now that basically show like your kids whining, evolutionarily speaking, is designed to activate your nervous system, right? Because
Hmm.
basically your nervous system is there to protect you. And like, what does your kid whining like simulate? It's like, oh, danger, right? And therefore you're like, oh, fuck, danger, right? So, like, again, 80/20, the way that we are just wired, it's all kind of stacked against you as like this little powder keg of stuff that's going on. Like you said, like underneath the little cork that's in there, right? And we do a really good job of making sure that cork stays on, but like, works until it doesn't. And wouldn't it be cool to, yeah, have the cork? That's great. Like, having a strong mindset is great, right? Being able to do something even though you don't feel like doing it is a great skill to have. But when you just basically pull that lever nonstop, eventually, you know, the juice runs out, if you will.
Yeah. So what you're saying is our kids are Mentos and we're his Coke, and as soon as they start whining, just
Mm. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Right. And so, like, and sometimes there's not a lot of time before like the Mentos actually makes it into the Coke,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of times, like when you aren't aware of like how your nervous system gets your attention, right? When you learn how to like regulate this stuff, it's like it never goes in, or like it goes in, right? But we don't react to it, basically, right? Because a lot of times the ingredients that are in there are basically the ingredients that we got, basically, because that's what our parents gave us, right? So we kind of have to like metabolize and adjust the ingredients like within the bottle. So like when other things come in contact with that stuff and we come in contact with it, it's not so reactive, right? And like it takes a while to fizz. Like it's still gonna fizz, but it's not gonna, you know. I think about those like funny Mentos Coke things where the thing, a guy puts it in there and flies and like blasts him in the face.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want it. We don't want it to have that effect, that
Yeah.
impact.
It's kind
Yeah.
of funny because like right now with my son, he's just turned 9, and he's starting to get that like preteen-esque mentality. He wants to hang out with his friends, wants video games, and we're starting to get into that point where it's like, oh man, like you definitely it's taken all the things I got to keep on the cork. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think that's just, I mean, that's something we all go through as parents. Is like you're gonna have those moments where you're gonna explode, and it's all about what you take from it, how you learn from it, and then also like what you do with it. Like with our kids, when we fight, like if something comes up, what usually we like to do is either we solve it, we figure out, hey, what's going on, like, and how can we fix it for next time? Or if it's a big fight, we like to, hey, let's put a damper on this. If it's something we need to talk about tomorrow, let's talk about it tomorrow. And by that point, our kids have totally forgotten about it. And it's like, it's so much a less thing versus like trying to ramp up everything in the moment.
Yeah.
But no, I really like that. Like you just visualization of when you look at it versus like that's why when we get mad, that's our kids are whining. That's what's going on. It's all internal.
Yeah.
People don't want to think about it's all inside of me. It's just we're like oh, why do I do that? You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes a little bit of effort. And like, for example, like with your kids and not remembering it, I've got my handy dandy brain here, right? So like kids, like, okay, people think, oh, kids' brain is 90% developed by age 5, right? And what they mean by that is like it's almost this size, right? At eight, like fully formed, which I don't think this is actually full representation, like model size of the brain, but I digress, right? But what's not developed is this part, the frontal lobe,
Mm,
right? Your prefrontal cortex. That doesn't come fully online until you're 25, right? So newsflash for everybody that doesn't know it, adolescence doesn't end until, 24, right? So take how old you are minus 25, and that's the amount of time you have actually been an adult,
mm,
right? So idea of like you're an adult at 18 in my mind is like BS. Like cuz physiologically, biologically, like you don't even have all of the things online you need to be to like prefrontal cortex, delayed gratification, impulse control, the ability to regulate emotions, your ability to stay on task, right? Critically think, problem solve, be creative, right? The ability to be like, you know what? I don't know if I should do this now because it might impact me, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, right? So when you're dealing with kids and you're talking about like, yeah, tomorrow, the next day, they didn't even realize like they forget about it. It's like, yeah, that's how kids work because they do not have this online. So the thing that is right now that's so big is an emotion, is a feeling, right? And your job as a parent is to basically lend your kid this, right? And guess what? If you don't know how to regulate your nervous system, what happens is this goes offline for you when your kids go offline,
mm,
right? So you don't have access to the thing that they want, which again is like a calm presence, right? And a lot of times we try to meet it, match it with fear. We try to match it with like, if you don't do this, then you don't get this, which is like pointless because the part of their brain that they need to actually like understand what that means for them later is gone, right? If you don't stop, or next time you hit your brother, right? Or you do this, or you lose this later, it's like that is like you're setting your kid up for failure. Remember what I said about responsibility without capacity is shame. Like that's what you're doing to your kid. Like, hit you straight here, hard truth. Sometimes my Instagram's kind of like this, right? It's like that is what's happening, right? It's kind of like you're telling your kid to jump and touch this bar, and they can literally, physiologically, biologically only jump this high.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, jump this high. I can't. Jump this high. I can't. Eventually, the kid just is like, oh, it must be me. That's
Mm-hmm.
what kids do, right? They make it about themselves, right? You get into a fight, right? Sometimes they come back and they're like, do you still love me? Right? Or it's like, I'm sorry, dad or mom, right? It's my fault, right? Even when like the fight was maybe between, you and your wife, let's just say, it's like, again, when you're talking about like safety survival, your nervous system comes up with like these ideas and thoughts, and they link things together. And when a kid can't control something, like what they can control is like, oh, it's my fault, right? And they make it about me, right? And what happens eventually is like that turns a kid into like a people pleaser,
Yeah.
right? Or an appeaser, or a kid that shuts down and checks out, or a kid that, you know, gets really aggressive, right? Eventually, because basically, like they make it mean something about themselves. So what happens is they become more externally focused, right? Oh, shoot, dad's not okay. Let me make sure dad's okay before I'm okay, is what happens ultimately. Is like one of the things that could happen. And so like I always talk to my guys about like when like after we build these skills and they're still having trouble, it's like, look, here's your motto. It's connection before correction. And this is becoming to be like a lot more mainstream in like the called the parenting space, if you will. Because like there has to be a connection, a regulation, right? And first of all, you have to stay regulated. Otherwise, your kid's got no shot, basically, right? And when they calm down, right, and come back into a regulated state, then all of a sudden you can talk about it. Because like we want to get to like talking about it, or like explaining it, or asking questions, which is just the worst. I don't know. I don't know. Why'd you do that? I don't know. Right? Which is the truth. They don't. Literally, they're offline. Right? And I know everybody can relate to this because this is like, I hear this every single day almost. And the biggest breakthroughs that you'll ever have is, again, being able to stay in control in the moment, so that like when your kid does calm down, right? What happens, that turns into a rep, right? Of like, I had a big emotion. What was it? Fear, embarrassment, shame, sadness, anger, right? And they're like, ah, right. And you're there. You're able to like help them breathe through it, walk them through it, just be with them, maybe go for a walk, play catch, whatever it is. And that's a rep of like, okay, that's what that is, right? And then you can talk about it afterwards, like, hey, I noticed that you were like, feeling angry or upset or sad. Like, tell me more, right? And then they start to learn for themselves, like, oh, that's what that is. That's a feeling. That's like an intense, like somatic, right? Or like my chest getting all tight, or heat, or whatever it is. Because what happens is when we match it, because we're activated, let's just say,
Mm-hmm.
then our kid learns that's not okay, right? And kids can't learn to regulate emotions that basically they aren't allowed to feel. And they aren't going to be allowed to feel them if those emotions, like we're just talking about, like, you know, kids that remind you of you, right? Triggers you, you're going to do things like yell. You're going to do things like go to your room, or like shame on you, or like, um, you know, basically make an environment, whether you know it or not, where that thing is not welcome. And again, therefore, you don't get reps. And what's crazy is like basically for guys, like this starts really young, right? Because as guys, we just have this. For boys, it's like, oh, like they need to be tough, right? So in that toughness actually is where the suppression starts, the repression starts, because like we don't let them cry. We don't like support them in their sad, in their pain, in their fear. We're just like, suck it up, tough it up, buck up, right? So what that kid learns is basically, well, I'm alone when I feel this way. Fuck that. That sucks a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Better not feel that way. Because if I do, it's like, my parents basically don't accept me, right? So we, again, as kids, we're like, oop, there's something wrong with me. Oop, I'm going to reject this part of me, right? I'm not going to let myself feel that, right? I'm not going to let anybody else see that I even like experience that. Ooh, I'm going to be quote unquote stoic, right? Which again, the unfortunate or fortunate thing is that actually works really well in business and being an entrepreneur. It's like, oh, don't feel any feelings, just do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, wow, you're really good at that. Here's money. When we're like, yeah, cool, right? And it works until it doesn't. And then again, where the armor usually cracks is when you have kids, long-term relationship, you can't, it's not a sustainable business model, basically.
Well, for people listening, instead of doing the whole, you're loud, so I'm gonna take this away later, or you like
Mm-hmm.
doing that kind of punishment, what is something they could do to replace that in that moment?
Yeah. I mean, well, it's totally dependent on the situation. But the first thing you want to do is check yourself. When they get loud, what happens for you? Just notice that next time. Take a breath first, right? Before yelling, right? And a lot of times you can meet it with the opposite, right? Because most of the time, when your kid is seemingly giving you a hard time, right? Really, what that like communication is like they're having a hard time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when a kid is loud, when a kid is mad, kid is upset, usually what's happening is kids have all of the um, emotions and feelings that adults do, right? They have the same felt sense, but zero capacity, not zero capacity, but limited capacity to be able to regulate that stuff. So you first of all, you have to model that it's okay, right? It's okay to like get loud, right? And then afterwards, you can talk about like, hey, when you get loud, here's something else that you can do, right? Because a lot of times what happens is it gets there, or especially as kids get older, because they are bottling it up, right? So in a in a in a way, this is kind of a product of like what's been going on. So it's not something that immediately just changes by like a quick tip or a tactic, right? This is like the thing that's been engraved and encoded in them, right? So it first starts with you, right? And being calm, taking a breath, right? And depending on what it is, it could be going over there and saying, like, hey, is everything okay? Right. But you are in a calm voice. I remember my dad used to always do this to me. Like, I'd say something like I was kind of a dick to my brother and sister, right? Mostly my brothers, right? And there's lots of reasons for that. But mostly I was like sad, right? And I was upset. And I was like, had all this stuff inside me that I didn't know about, and I would do something. I always remember my dad would be like, "Hey, you everything all right, dude? You okay?" Right? And I used to be like, "Yeah," right? But inside I was like, "Fuck!" He like saw me, right? Basically, like what was actually going on, which immediately stopped the behavior, right? He didn't like send me to my room. He didn't punish me for it, right? Because most of the times, again, when kids are like acting up, they're having a hard time, right? And it's usually because they're having overwhelming feelings. So when you meet them with calm and you start being curious before you get furious, if you will, right? What happens is all of a sudden you see the kid, right? Which is a lot exactly what they're asking for. And when they get that, a lot of times they're like, oh shit, right? It's kind of like when you're having a conversation with somebody and like the person's like genuine and they kind of like go beyond small talk and you kind of like, you're like, oh fuck, this guy's asking me a real question, right? That is like kind of what you want to like do with your kids, which is difficult to do when life's crazy, everything's so fast, and like it's hard for us to slow down and just kind of like be present. But that starts with like understanding what's going on for us because they are going to ask in ways that don't make sense, that are indirect, that's going to be like misbehavior, right? And all they're doing without knowing what they're doing is reaching for connection, right? and knowing, again, like all this stuff basically kind of goes on subconsciously, right? And like basically bubbles up via your nervous system, right? Because like when we think about like survival, part of the things that we're finding now is like one of the things that we need just as much as we need water, food, and oxygen is connection, relationship, especially for your kids, right? Connection is sort of like the currency, I'll say, right? And like the connection between you and your kid is always something that they are, whether they know it or not, monitoring, right? So your responses are going to basically create like, was that okay or was that not okay? How can I be and how can I not be based on like your reactions? But if you're not in control of your reactions, then what you're going to be giving them and passing down to them is basically like what you got. And if you didn't like that, well, then like that becomes your responsibility to become aware of and ultimately change through, learning these skills so that you are able to pause and choose in the moment as opposed to like react. Right. And I'm not here to, shame anybody and say that like, hey, like getting loud and blowing up never happens. Right. It's not about that. It's about repair, but it is about like lowering the frequency, intensity, and duration of like how often that happens. And you want it to be the exception, right? As opposed to the standard. Because like, hey, going on an apology tour only works so long too,
Yeah.
right? Before it's like, yeah, of course, lip service. You're sorry until it happens again, basically. And that's not what we want.
Well, it just kind of becomes meaningless after a while. You say sorry so many times, and it's
Yeah.
just like, well, he's just saying it to say it again.
Yeah. And like, do you really want me? Can I just like really drop a bomb right now? That'd be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the deal. Your nervous system basically chooses in the familiar over what's good for you, right? There's a saying that's like your nervous system will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. Well, if the familiar hell is like the confusion of sometimes he's safe, sometimes he's not, like for dads, right? Whether you have a son or a daughter, right? Sometimes he's emotionally available for me, sometimes he's just like checked out. Sometimes he's reactive, sometimes he's calm. Like raising his voice at me is something that is normal. Well, guess what? Your daughter is going to choose a partner that treats her the same way,
Hmm.
right? Your son is going to treat women that way because that's kind of like the standard that you're setting, right? So the choice that you have to make is like, and the realization of the weight of the situation, like talking about like, hey, is change now something I want to do or should I put it off to tomorrow? It's like every day you have like a scale as the visualization, and it's like you're either stacking weight on this side of like, yes, that's how they're gonna choose, or you're stacking weight this way, right? Do you want your daughter to like be like, ooh, this is familiar, it's okay for him to treat me and talk to me that way? Or do you want your daughter to, I think the kids are saying it nowadays, like get the ick when
Mm.
like her boyfriend like raises his voice or shuts down or closes off, right? Or is explosive or reactive or angry. Like, do you want her to be like, oof, yeah, and that doesn't sit good in my system. That's an alarm bell, as opposed to like, ooh, let me fix it. Because what was familiar to me is like my dad was always reactive and I was the one that had to like fix. And that's my role. And therefore, guess what? They are 100%, whether you like it or not, going to choose into that.
Or is that old saying, like, you marry your dad? That's exactly what it is.
We choose into our unfinished business, basically. But yeah,
Oh, I
you
like
marry your
that.
dad, you marry your mom. There's an element of that for everybody.
Mhm. Well, it's just like, we have to be kind of an umbrella. Like, we have to be over our kids, protecting them from all the crap that came down on us. And we
Mm,
have to be there for them when it is in that time of, that stormy season where we're even, sometimes there's holes in those umbrellas and we're going to come at it. But it's just all about
right.
us standing there. And as parents and as like what this podcast is, and for all the people who listen to this podcast, like we want to take that step in becoming a better parent, becoming a better dad. And just everything you've said is, I hopefully helped a lot of people today. And it's eye opening because you don't think about internal, you just always think about external.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the whole saying? It's like your external like reflects your internal a lot
Mhm.
of ways, right? And like again, like where does that all start? It's like it's what's etched in your nervous system, which in a lot of times for everybody, it's like that was put there by their environment. So like you basically aren't and weren't in control of that. And but like as adults now, it's like what we can do is like there's lots of support out there and information that you can access and choose into that can like when you think about an umbrella, it's like yeah, but like if we've got these like holes in our umbrella, like water's going to drip through
Mhm.
where like we didn't get the right support, right? So now it's all about reaching out and like filling the holes in your umbrella so that like yeah, like when it rains, like your kids don't get wet just like you did. Yeah, and like when you can't, it's like it's all about having the support. So like again, you know, not doing it all by yourself is the point I'm making.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
love that, dude. It's easier to do with people rather than try and figure out. It's like building Legos without the instructions. Like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like it can be fun, right? To like, be creative and free and whatever. But yeah, like having like and especially like when there are instructions and you're like, "Hey, I want it to look like this." And it's like, "Okay, here are the instructions available to you." And you're like, "You know what? I think I'm just going to try it on my own." Right? It's like, "Here's the instructions. You want this. This is how you do it." "Yeah, I'm going to try it on my own." Right?
That
That's
cool
a
car is going to come out looking like a funky boat.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, not
Yeah.
take up too much of your time for dear. Like, wow, that didn't come out at all. Wow. To not take up too much of your time today. For anyone listening and want to learn more about you or maybe get coaching from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I hang out mostly on Instagram. So Jason Schnitzer coaching on Instagram is where you can find me. If this stuff resonated with you and you did want to learn more, there's a link in my bio there. Just book a call with me, and it's me that you hop on the call with. It's me that does the coaching, and love to hear more about your situation to see if maybe we're a good fit. So that's where I'd go.
Well, thank you for coming on today, speaking into men, and just being a bright light and a coach for people who need that in today's society because there's not a lot out there. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, keep on doing what you're doing, man.
Definitely. For everyone listening, like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Later.